Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi everyone, welcome to Shape the System. Joined today by the founders of CarNextDoor, Will Davies and Dave Trumbull. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks, Vinny.
Thanks, Vin. Good to be here.
Yeah, nice. Look, I just wanted to sort of start by really diving in straight into CarNextDoor and understanding a little bit about like the problem that you guys are solving and how the market operated before you arrived and then how you're playing in that market. Just unpack that a bit.
Well, when we started CarNextDoor, the vast majority of people were driving around their own cars, owning and driving around their own cars, which is still largely the case today, but it's changed. It's changed. So instead of 98% of people driving around their own cars, now only 95% of people drive around their own cars. The biggest thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to move people away from them thinking that their only way of getting around is to buy a car, pay all the fixed costs, and drive it all the time, to a world where people can access a car when they need one, but then use other forms of transport like public transport and walking and riding to get around instead. So what CarNextDoor does is we let people who have cars that aren't using them share them out to people who need to use a car every now and again. And by doing that, and vice versa, yes.
Right. And then there's some metrics around this that I think I've come across somewhere in my travels on your site around utilization, like the typical person who owns a car, how much they drive it, how much it sits idle, like the actual cost per kilometre. Can you talk us through some of these kind of metrics?
Well, the average car, if it's a newish car, it costs people around about $9,000 a year. The average car only gets used for 4% of the time. So 96% of the time it's sitting around doing nothing. And so for the vast majority of people, there's certain people, if you're a travelling salesman or you're using your car to get to and from work every day without fail, then sure, I think your car still makes financial sense. But for a massive chunk of people, with the amount that they're using their car, they're paying exorbitant amounts of money. They'd be better off catching a taxi everywhere. So that's kind of where we step in.
Got it. And then the promise that you give to someone who has a car, let's start on this side of the equation first, is that if you're going to own one of these things, then what is it? Is it a promise of being part of something larger? Is it purely a financial transaction? Like it feels to me, and I think from reading some of what's on the site, a lot of this is as much about community or movement as it is about mechanics and money.
Well, we did a bit of a survey on what the reasons are for people wanting to share their car out on CarNextDoor, and it was quite interesting that the biggest driver is money. And the second biggest driver, and it's not far off behind, is they just felt like their car was being wasted. It just irks people to have their car sitting around doing nothing all the time. So they wanted it to get used. But a big chunk of our users are on the platform or our owners are on the platform because they can see all this waste. They know that they can pay for a big chunk or all of their car costs by putting it on, and that's why they do it.
Right. And then just staying focused a little bit on the owner side of the equation. You know, because you guys have been at this for a few years now, like what are some of the key challenges in actually getting owners onto the platform, whether that's practical challenges or emotional or just lethargy and apathy generally?
Well, there's been quite a few challenges actually, and probably the one that stands out is the psychological change of the car you own is the extension of the self for a lot of people, and allowing people into your what people consider their personal space is one. Right. It's a big decision or concept to get across for a number of people, and they have to convince partners and whatnot as well. And it also it's just quite new. I think, fortunately, as we've been going along, this wasn't necessarily the intention when we started out, but other things happening at the same time around the sharing economy and, Airbnb and Uber and things like that has helped frame the concept a bit better for people and being a bit more digestible.
Right.
Yeah. People can be a bit hesitant to try something new as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Will, you were going to add to that?
What we did was we decided just to launch in Bondi rather than trying to launch Australia-wide or even Sydney-wide. And we could really focus our efforts on just getting those first 25 cars on in Bondi. And then once we'd done that and we'd kind of proven that it was a thing and it actually works and you've got some good case studies, it becomes a lot easier to get other owners to put their cars on. Now we're in the situation where there's 3,500 cars or 3,500 cars listed on the platform. That's a lot of people who have direct experience with it now, and they start telling their friends, and this sort of reputation stuff builds up. So if you were to have a mate of yours say, "Oh, I've got my car on CarNextDoor," you should chuck yours on. That's heaps better than any marketing that we can do. So, but geez, it's just more time to build that up.
And look, I think, because I'm living in Sydney and there's some creative that you guys did a couple of years ago, I think, which made it very visible that someone was on the CarNextDoor platform or driving around in a CarNextDoor car, for want of a better word. Can you talk me through a little bit of that thinking and how that sort of landed?
Are you talking about the stickers on the cars or?
Yeah, like the stickers on the car, but there's more to it than that. It's not just there's a CarNextDoor sticker, but then there's these other stickers. There was obviously they're not all the same, I guess.
Yeah. Where I'm going. So we've got 16 different faces that owners can choose from that they can put their car on. So it's actually quite funny. When we first started, I got onto 99 Designs and spent $240 on this really crappy, shitty brand that I was happy with the name, but then this logo that we had was horrendous. And we used to say to people when we launched in Bondi, we were saying, "Oh, you happy to put this sticker on the car?" And they'd be like, "No."
It was a big ugly magnet. Took up half the side of the car.
Yeah. And then when we kind of worked out we were potentially onto something, we spent some more money on branding, like got a proper branding job done.
Right.
And the idea with the branding was that there's 16 different faces. So now that the question becomes, which face do you want to put on your car? Do you want the cowboy or do you want the surfer guy or the hipster girl? And that's a much better question to ask. And so as soon as you're giving people some choice in what they're going to put on their car, they're like, "Oh, sweet, I'll do that." So that was quite a interesting way of getting our branding out. So we don't require people to put their stickers on the car, but roughly it must be 90-95% of people do, which is awesome. It's a big chunk of our leads, big chunk of our new users come from people just seeing cars on the street, and that familiarity. It's like what I was saying. Like the best thing is for someone to tell their friend, "Oh, you should use CarNextDoor." The second best thing is for someone to see them out being used, because that's social proof right there.
Yep.
I was going to say another thing those faces gives us is that the variety of it. It kind of adds a personality to the car. All the cars are different. They're owned by different people. So having the branding kind of extend that concept of different personalities to the car, I think it helps what we're trying to put across.
Yeah, I think it was a super clever move. I think because people underestimate when you're trying to make change or change behaviour, how difficult it is for people to do a new thing. And one of the big levers, and Will, you just use the word social proof. A lot of people aren't familiar with this idea that if you see other people doing things, then it normalizes the behavior for you and it makes you more comfortable to do it. And I think the great example of that is where you've got two restaurants next to each other and one of them's really busy and you choose to go into the busy one because clearly that's the better one.
Exactly what I do.
Fascinating. And then
a bit sorry for the other one, but you don't eat there.
You don't. And just a little bit on, I think the behaviour change thing and getting flywheel or whatever you want to call it going. Clearly a challenge, but there was an overarching mission that I think people buy into, and there was obviously a focus in Bondi and I'm guessing the other places that you went where you thought, well, this mission will resonate with this group of people. Was there that level of thought in where you started and how you approached kind of growing the network, or how did you think about that?
Well, I guess what I described to you is on the survey what our car owners say their primary motivation for listing their car is. What Dave and my primary motivation is we want to reduce carbon emissions. That's why we set up CarNextDoor. So my very quick backstory for me is I had a mortgage broking business. It was going well, and I made a bit of money and able to go on lots of holidays and stuff like that. But as I was getting older, I was getting more and more concerned with the amount of damage that humans are causing to the environment, especially with regards to carbon emissions. And because I think it's just got this ability to cause widespread catastrophe. And so I decided I wanted to really focus all my energies on that. Couldn't work out how mortgage broking was going to be doing that. And so sold that business and then went hunting primarily for a business that A, I thought could be a successful business, and B, was going to reduce carbon emissions. And so, I mean, I hate cars. I'm pretty sure Dave hates cars as well. We're not in here because of our love of cars. We're here because we want to sort of make an impact on carbon emissions.
And that kind of higher order purpose for you guys, is that something that you maybe not versed in, such as we hate cars, but do you share that with the community? Is it like, hey, look, we have a measure here that says ultimately we're trying to reduce the impact of the cars that people do own, and we measure that. We have some sense of how much difference we've made?
Yeah, I think we spent a bit of time working out, the wording around our mission and vision and things like that. Aside from the overarching thing of reducing carbon, we settled on to reduce the people and the planet from the one car, one person mentality, and we push that internally and externally as well. And that's really it. Is a changing a mindset in a real kind of practical way for plenty of benefits for all different people.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm seeing there is it's a more practical and pragmatic way for someone to say, what is it you guys do? Well, we, enable car ownership to be shared amongst multiple people. What's your, purpose? Well, to move away from one car, one person. So there's a really kind of practical link there rather than a kind of nebulous, hey, we want to reduce carbon emissions. Sure, that might be how we measure it. And just in the my understanding as well was, because I've known you guys for a little while, there were some practical challenges in actually getting this thing to even work. Like how do you set up a network of cars that can be rented? Like, what were some of the practical challenges? And I mean, this sort of lends a bit to your respective backgrounds as well.
Sure. So, I mean, from a technical perspective, it's all really got to work easily and without issue, and that's very difficult to do when you're kind of marrying up software on the web with physical things like cars moving around all different times of the day, and layer that on with not just one set of customers, the people purchasing the product or renting the cars, but you've also got to deal with the perspective and needs and requirements of the owners providing the service and whatnot. And balancing all that is really quite difficult. And the harder you work, the easier it gets and smoother it gets for everyone. But I guess the result of that is everyone thinks it all happens very easily and seamlessly. So, what's stopping? Why haven't you done that feature yet, for example? That can be a challenge.
Right.
Yeah. But it's good to have those challenges. I reckon it keeps them engaged.
Sure.
I guess so there was I think 4 things that we were trying to solve for. One is, could we actually get people to list their car on the platform? Was it actually something that people would do? 2, would people want to rent other people's cars? So that's getting the supply and the demand. The third was the technology solution, which Dave just touched on. How do you get all that in the right spot so you've got a thing that works? And then the fourth was insurance, which is obviously pivotal to what we're doing. So what we did was we kind of knew that those were the four factors when we launched into it, and we went about a process of just one by one trying to get as much information and prove each of those things was possible in terms of, I mean, which I can go into detail, but we probably don't quite have enough time in this podcast.
Yeah, but it sounds like in isolation you could break that down. And I guess I know on the technical side that early on there was, you were using a bunch of third-party components to make some things work, and then decided, you know what, we have to have some of our own hardware and eventually some of our own software to be able to get the control, presumably for the reliability, Dave, or?
Yeah, so I mean, we came into this business not really knowing the first thing about running a car sharing business. So to think that we had the now sort of skills to just go out and build the right system from scratch would have been quite optimistic and take a long time as well. So we did do a search for what was out there that we could leverage to get started, and we did find a kind of a white label third-party platform that got us off the ground in Bondi and got us kind of proving the initial concept. But quickly it became clear that, we needed to adapt our business model constantly and evolve and change the way we do our business processes and the product we're offering both sides. That a third-party platform where you were just a startup without any, huge amount of traction yet, it's really difficult to form, drive that agenda of where that platform's going or the product's going.
Sure.
So it was enough to get those first, sprinkles of car sharing going. But, pretty soon we decided we needed to take that all in-house. But I think at that point we'd been going through year two and learned a lot and knew what we wanted to do.
Yeah. And look, I think what I'm trying to, I guess, sort of shine a light on with this particular part is so often people move into systems development and say the only way we can get something going is through building a platform to do the thing, not realising, and as you just articulated, Will, that there was two sets of customer behaviours that needed to change initially, notwithstanding an insurance company coming to the market. People had to want to list and people had to want to rent, and so many of those challenges in customer behaviour when you're trying to reshape the way people think, in this case about car ownership, you can move a long way towards understanding whether you can shift that behaviour or what will shift that behaviour without having to go into development. I guess the reason why I'm trying to sort of, revisit it is to help people to maybe rethink this desire to have to go and build product and engineering stuff, which is expensive and time consuming, before having some degree of validation that customers are even willing to change their behaviours or what triggers them to.
Yeah, we certainly found out. We got to find out with a budget of less than $80,000 that we were onto something that people were actually going to do something with. And I think that what we were doing, the technology we had to create was a lot more expensive, a lot more complicated than technology a lot of people would need to create. So certainly if someone's just getting started and they've got an idea and they want to test it out, if you can find a third-party platform that does 80% of what you're wanting to do, then I think that is an awesome way to test the idea out. You can always move from that to your own platform and build your own one eventually. But, so there's two reasons. One is, as Dave was mentioning, you learn about what you actually need, not just what you think you need at the start. And the second part is that you would just be amazed. You might have all these high ideals for all the features you're going to build in your own proprietary platform, but the reality is it's going to take you years to get those features. And if you find a reasonably close third-party platform, they're most likely going to have features that you wouldn't be able to build for 2 or 3 years to come. We only had two-way reviews from about what do you reckon, Dave? 2 years ago?
A bit longer now, but we were 4 or 5 years in before we had that ability. Yeah,
I was just going to say, I used to joke that we were the only peer-to-peer platform in the world that didn't have two-way reviews, which I'm pretty sure we were. It just seems like such a fundamental thing that you need to have as a two-sided marketplace, but we didn't for years.
Well, that's a true pioneer who says that they don't actually need that thing.
Yeah.
Hey, just changing gears a little bit. And Will, you touched on a little bit, but how did you guys find yourselves here? I want to understand a little bit about your own, backstories. And Will, you sort of talked a bit about the mortgage broking, and I mean, there was an aha moment for that. So how to dive into that in a bit more detail for both of you, but then also paint a picture of how you guys landed working on this together as well.
I think I covered that in my answer before, but so it's probably a better one for Dave to hook into, I think.
Sure. So while Will and I went to uni together and flatted together a bit after that, so we knew each other really quite well. But we'd gone off and done our own careers. My background's in computer engineering, so I'd gone off and for about 10 years I'd done software engineering in the finance industry. I guess arguably burnt out and was taking some time off as a stay-at-home dad and kind of starting to think about what is next and the need, like Will, to kind of feel a lot more engaged in what I was doing and aligned with what I thought was important, broader than just where paycheck's coming from.
Sure.
And because I knew Will well and we'd stayed in touch quite a lot, I had heard about his idea and of starting this up in Australia. And I was it took a little bit of convincing because I was very much like many first kind of reactions at that point in time is like, that's not a thing. That sounds really difficult. All these reasons why not. And Will was able to very quickly answer each and every one of them and all of my concerns. And I ran out of my list and thought, you know what, this sounds kind of what I'm looking for. The social good to it, but also the real deep technical challenges as well. So I jumped on board back at the start of 2013 when it was Will and an idea, and needed some technical help.
2012, Dave. You've done an extra year than that.
2012. Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah.
Time flies when you guys are enjoying yourselves. Just the reason I was laughing at the start there is I think when you said Will's idea, I think, Will, you've had a few ideas to date. Mortgage broking and car sharing have only been two of those.
Yep.
From memory.
Yep. I guess so after I sold the mortgage broking after I sold the mortgage broking business, my mandate had to be a carbon reducing business and had to be have a good prospect of success. And the two big ideas that I focused on, I kind of had this period after I sold it that I was sort of just floating around trying to work out what the right step was. One of them was I looked at importing solar panels, but just got really confused about how that whole market was going to work. And, there's so much government policy could change or new technology could come out that could just kill everything you're doing, or, Chinese could decide they're going to subsidize the crap out of it and everything sort of turns difficult. So I stopped that. But the other one was aquaponics, where you grow fish and then the fish poo and water and you fertilize the plants with that poo water, and then that cleans the water, and then you sort of create this whole sort of closed circuit. So I built one of them on my balcony and got 100 fish. 100 went in, 20 survived. Now in the dam at my parents-in-law's place. I didn't kill them, but it's actually very hard to keep fish alive.
He did.
And the other thing I found out that growing, like, I've got such more respect when you buy a lettuce, like the amount of work and effort that goes into getting a lettuce to your table is unbelievable, because I couldn't do it very well.
Amazing. That's good. Look, I think I knew a couple of those. I was worth touching on those because I just think, I don't know, people tend to think that, you look at something that suddenly becomes in the public domain, and people tend to think that happened overnight and there wasn't a bunch of false steps. I think if the general narrative is there, then you ultimately can find a way through to something that ticks both boxes, the impact and purpose box, and the, hey, this thing is sustainable, either self-sustaining or profitable, or however you want to set it up. Just thinking about a little bit more around where CarNextDoor is going. And I think the parallel for me in this is there was a lot of buzz in about 5 years ago around peer-to-peer lending. And what you ended up seeing was that the supply side, the people who were lending the money, were actually large institutions. And you've had some news recently, I think with Hyundai, that seems to touch on an idea like this where it may be evolving from peer to peer to something that looks a little different. Can you talk us through that a bit?
Yeah, I think in a lot of marketplaces there tends to be a trend. So if you look at sort of eBay, Amazon's already like that, isn't it? There's no sort of small. Let's just eBay, Airbnb are probably two really good examples. It starts off with pretty much just individual to individual, but then over time, people will start to create mini businesses out of it. Then if it's a bit of go, some of those businesses get bigger. We're certainly starting to see a bit of that. We've got some. I mean, Hyundai is more looking to learn about how transport's going to be used. So I don't know if their ambition is to have 1,000 cars on the platform in the next few years. But we've certainly got other organisations who have a bunch of cars on the platform now and are using it as and individuals who've got 10 or 15 vehicles who are using it as a mini business, which is quite exciting. But it definitely does change it. We're keen to always have a big chunk of what we do as peer to peer and always keep providing it. But I think that as we grow and as it is profitable for a bunch of people, then that's kind of a good thing to do to have happen as well. It's going to increase our supply, which has always been the tough bit for us to keep on. Like, we've got plenty of demand. We need the cars to fill it.
Totally get it. And so just so people know what the Hyundai deal is, just because we didn't specifically cover it, they've done a deal to pre-install the access to the cars in new cars they sell. Is that right?
Yeah, so Hyundai has already some technology in their car that allows the owner to remotely unlock their car and remotely start it and things like that. Through the investment that Hyundai's put in CarNextDoor, we kind of agreed to kind of work together on a few technical fronts. And one of those is to integrate that technology they already have in the cars with the CarNextDoor platform, so that not just the owner can unlock the car, but the borrower of that car, we can give access for them to remotely unlock the car via their phone at the start and lock it up at the end.
Got it. And look, I just think it's fascinating because it changes the dynamic of the business of car ownership, that says, well, if you're in the business of selling cars, the car manufacturer who says you can also offset that cost or be part of a larger, narrative by renting that car out to other people probably has a competitive advantage. And I think that's an interesting lever generally.
Yeah, and I think that over the next few years, we're going to see more and more manufacturers looking to make their vehicles sharing ready, whether so that they can be shared by people. That's going to become a critical part of, or it's going to become an important feature in cars. And I think Hyundai is doing a great job leading the way in that, and hopefully it pays dividends for them.
Yeah, it probably ties in well to a movement towards autonomous cars as well, where you can still own it and someone else, it will drive itself, but it can be driven to other people and driven, carry other people as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the next step. So there's sort of three big trends in transport. One is electrification, the second is sharing, and the third is autonomy. And I think they're all going to mix together beautifully over the next 10 years.
Just generally then, given those trends and those themes, what are the other ventures or people who you think are doing amazing stuff in that kind of general trend and maybe beyond that as well, maybe in the aquaponics trend, if you like, Will?
I haven't been paying a great deal of attention to aquaponics since my foray into it. Yeah. Look, from my perspective, Uber gets a bad rap for, some of their tactics that they deployed in Australia and overseas and some of the cultural stuff, but you've got to give it to them. They've opened up mobility in a massive way, and I actually see a big part of people being able to live a car-free life and move away from the one person, one car mentality that Dave was talking about before is to have a range of options available for different types of trips. So CarNextDoor alone is never going to be enough. CarNextDoor is great if you want to go to the Blue Mountains for the weekend, or if you want to go to 2 or 3 places across Sydney over a day. But Uber is fantastic if you want to do a one-way trip into work because you just have to, or you want to go to the pub or something like that. So having this suite of transport options available to people, CarNextDoor, Uber, public transport, riding sometimes, that's when people can truly feel like they don't need to own a car. So I think Uber and the other car sharing companies, there's GoCatch and now there's Ola, great additions to it that have been forging in this direction.
Right. DT?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Ditto. Yeah, not much more to add. I think, in terms of who's shaping things globally, and obviously Elon Musk's in the news a lot. I find him completely fascinating as a spectacle, but the stuff he's trying to do and the stuff he's done it's forcing everyone else to change, basically. And I think that's what it's all about. What Uber and GoCatch and Lyft and like that have done, they forced the taxi industry to real and cab charge and whatnot to really change. And now you just get a much better service, even if you're catching a taxi. It's probably not one company, but the change we've already seen is quite dramatic to what you would have, even 3 or 4 years ago, let alone 6 or 7 when we started. But then I also look to the people who are kind of forging ahead into the future, and their stuff's not out yet, and I'm pretty impressed by the ambition. And not all of them are going to work, but we talked about autonomous vehicles and electrification and stuff. That takes a huge amount of passion, investment, and commitment, and a lot of risk. So kudos to everyone getting involved in that stuff.
Yeah, totally. And look, probably just to round that out, and it's a bit of a leading question. You're both in a situation where the company was ostensibly started in Bondi in terms of where it was first available, now operates nationwide. I would say in some respects head office still in Sydney, but neither of you are really there. You live in different places, and I just wanted to understand that a bit because I think it's in answer to the question I normally ask, which is, in a world where so much needs to be done, how do you stay sane? So just wanted to explore that just a little bit.
Sure. So when we started CarNextDoor, Will was living in Sydney and I was living in Melbourne, and it was almost a toss of the coin to whether we started in Sydney or Melbourne. I wasn't prepared. We decided on Sydney, but I think with a risky early stage startup and settled family life and things, that not really wanting to move to Sydney at that point and the expense of it all. So we just started the business working remote from each other. And yes, we started head office in Sydney, and that was at the start a desk in a co-working space. And we grew. If we were going to kind of hire someone that was needed to kind of be in an office environment, that we settled on Sydney. But as we've grown, certain roles that's really beneficial. Others, particularly I'm thinking about the software engineering side, don't need that physical proximity. In fact, a lot of engineers work a lot better when they're not in an office with everyone. So we've been able to build up our engineering capability working completely remotely. And I think that's helped me stay sane and juggle things. I don't have to worry about a commute, and I live where I want to live, and I get the space, the mental space to focus on complex problems that I might struggle with in a noisy hustle bustle of an office environment.
Yeah, totally understand.
So that works for me.
And then, Will, your living situation sort of echoes that, but in a slightly different way, right?
Well, yeah. So I was in Sydney until 2017. So we set up an office in Sydney, and we've now got roughly 30 people in the head office in Sydney. So, but what I did was about 3 years ago, I moved to Berry. My family moved to Berry, but I come up and stay in Sydney 2 nights a week. So I'm 3 days, 2 nights in Sydney, which I actually find really quite useful. I smash out all my emails on the train. I use Gmail offline. And that's pretty much the only time I need to do emails. And then when I'm in Sydney, I can just sort of go really hard at work. And then when I'm back home, I'd still do a solid day, but I kind of, at 5:30, 6 o'clock, I finish up and I get to be more there for the family. So when I started CarNextDoor, I had no kids, and I've now got 3 kids. So a pretty big 10 years. And a lot of change. So you've needed to make some adjustments.
Yeah, I appreciate that for both of you, you're in a position where you're coming into something that quite often high risk and high stakes and high growth is associated with not having a lot of other responsibilities. And I think the balancing act of being able to meet those responsibilities and even create space, I think, as you put it, DT, whilst continuing to maintain and invest in really healthy family relationship, what actually keeps you sane for the work problem you're solving is a really it's really worthwhile.
Yeah, it wasn't always like that. It was probably overdid it in the early years. That's for sure.
Very common. I reckon that's heaps. I reckon we'll probably. I think I can tail that out to end properly. But thank you guys. That was super interesting and super informative. Really stoked to be talking to you and to sharing that with everyone.
Good to speak, Vinny, and best of luck with the belts.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to hear your voice, Vinny. It's I've missed it. Yeah, we should talk more often.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.